Well, hello and welcome. We're excited to have you here today for the next and most current installment of the Gateway Leadership's webinar series. We start here at 1, so we're just going to have a moment while people join the webinar today, but we're excited to have everyone. So thank you as everybody loads in. We'll do introductions in a moment, but just as a piece of housekeeping, within Zoom, there is a Q&A feature. We do encourage you to please, throughout the presentation, feel free to post questions in the Q&A feature, and we will use that to moderate our discussion with our panelists at the end of their presentations today. Now, I continue to see folks joining, but we're going to go ahead and get started in just a minute. But please also feel free to use the chat feature to introduce yourself. Let us know the institution or the organization that you're a part of. And tell us what part of the country or the part of the world that you are in. And so we're going to go ahead, and we're excited. I see all of our panelists here. Welcome, everybody. Again, to make sure you're in the right place today, this is the webinar on emerging markets, emerging opportunities, and it's the role of international partnerships. Now, as is the case with everything related to Gateway International, we are focused on a very future-forward perspective. What is emerging? What is cutting edge? What is different than what you may have seen before? And so we are thrilled to have our panelists here today. This is just a snapshot to make sure that you are in the right place. We're going to go ahead and do some formal introductions in a moment. I do want to let my colleague introduce herself because we are going to be working together as co-facilitators. Rosa, do you mind doing a brief introduction?
Thank you, George. And as you said, this is the beginning of a new edition of the Gateway Leadership Institute this spring. And the topic, as you said, is new directions with strategic international partnerships. And we are very, very happy to be having our panelists today and to be joined by all of you. Feel free, please, to ask any questions that you might have, and our panelists will be happy to answer them.
And for those of you to whom the Gateway Leadership Institute is new, the way we structure, up to this point, this is our 6th cohort. The way we run the Gateway Leadership Institute is that we host 3 public-facing webinars over the course of 10 to 13 weeks. We also have 3 private workshops just for the participants. And then based on the theme of the Institute, we are investing time and energy on the leadership and career aspirations of the participants, but also on creating a brand new resource that is going to be relevant for the broader field of international higher education at large, that is derived from the knowledge, experience, and theme of the current Institute. So again, today we are focused on international partnerships. My name is Dr. George Kacenga, and there is a slide in a moment where you can see brief bios for both Rosa and I, but we are thrilled and honored to be your facilitators today. If you don't know much about Gateway International, I do want to just highlight that we have a variety of services within Gateway. There are a number of solutions that are focused on. They do learning abroad. You can access a variety of resources. If you have not visited the Gateway International website, I certainly encourage you to do so. There is also a great blog that I would encourage you to subscribe to, just to keep current on a wide variety of things that are impacting the broader field of international higher education. So, as we said, again, my name is Dr. George Kacenga. I currently serve as the Vice President for Enrollment Management at William Patterson University of New Jersey. And Rosa, maybe your professional background?
Yes, hello. Again, my name is Rosa Almoguera, and I'm joining all of you from Spain today. And this is where I'm located and from where I work with Eduardo.
Wonderful. Rosa, do you want to introduce our sponsors as well and participating organizations?
Yes, we are very thankful to our participating organizations for making this Leadership Institute available to all of our participants at a lower and affordable rate. And these are Boston Education Group, QS, and Prodigy Finance. Thank you to all of them. And thanks also to our sponsors, which, as you can see there, are AECC, Study Abroad Consultants, Shorelight, Forstay, IDP Connect, and Verify Ed, through which our participants receive a digital certificate of completing the Gateway Leadership Institute.
Thank you so much, Rosa. And of course, we want to get to the content of today's webinar as quickly as possible. I see so many of you making introductions in the chat box, so thank you so much for that. Over the course of the presentation, please submit any questions that you have using Zoom's Q&A feature. We will monitor the chat if we see something there, but it's very helpful if they land in the Q&A feature. But today we have three academic and industry leaders in the space of international partnerships that are going to share different perspectives, new and emerging ideas relevant to strategic international partnerships that we intend and hope will be from a perspective that you have not yet considered for your institution or your professional position, and just broaden the way you're thinking about international partnerships moving forward. First, we'll have Dr. Jessica Evert. She's the Global Medical Director at the Child Family Health International. She's also on faculty at the University of California, San Francisco. We have Molly Dineen, who's the head of university development with Prodigy Finance. And then also Ben Webb, who's the Director of Client Partnerships for the US and for Canada with QS. So without further ado, we really want to jump into the substance of today's presentation. So I'll first ask Jessica if she could go ahead and get us started today.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So my understanding of the structure today is it's a bit of a speed dating, I think, for each topic and presenter. So I am going to present a lot of content in a quick way. The caveat is you will also have my email and you have the Q&A function in real time. So let's keep chatting and happy to be a resource going forward. I work for Child Family Health International, which is a nonprofit based in the Bay Area with international programs in 11 countries within the health sector. I'm going to kind of breeze through a variety of topics and connect their relevancy to your work around improving partnerships and expanding international education. In terms of co-locating ourselves, we're at the nexus really of often a low resource setting, whether that's domestically or internationally. Health-related programs also happen in high resource settings or resource settings that are similar to what students and faculty are used to. However, many of the challenges come when we have a resource differential. And then some sort of immersive learning, pedagogy or framework, experiential learning, service learning, volunteering, internships, and global health or health-related settings. These can be for undergraduate, graduate, or postgraduate students, nursing, allied health, undergraduate, pre-medical, pre-health, medical students, residents, and faculty. When it comes to health in the international scope, there's a huge disparity and burden of disease. And so as you can see here, this is child mortality rates. You can see that there's a very unequal distribution of where children, adults are dying and people are dying of preventable illness. This often creates a dynamic on campus where health-related programming is happening in lower or middle income countries, which is often locations that are not as common for traditional study abroad programs. I want to emphasize the rise of global health as a field. This was really defined in 2009, so relatively recent field. The reason it's important is because it really represents a paradigm shift from unrigorous kind of good intentions, questionable execution done under the auspices of medical brigades or of international health or of humanitarianism to really a field of study that's academic as well as practical. And it focuses on health disparities wherever they exist. It's not just over there. So you'll see a lot of local global health. But the reason it's important is because it's now a field. And so international education, along with faculty, schools, universities, are held to a higher standard aligned with this academic pursuit. There's also a lot of debates on what global health even is. And just to highlight that a colleague from Kenya actually said that global health is a concept fabricated by developed countries. And so one of the challenges for international education is to not fabricate someone else's reality. Tricia Todd, who's a leader in this sector at the University of Minnesota, says, first, do no help. And as you know, one of the main principles of medicine is first, do no harm. But first, do no help is so important because if you're going to be aligning with best practices, with legal and ethical benchmarking, we really need to counteract the inertia to go somewhere else and have our students or our faculty helping or fixing. There has been a real shift in the field. And so the traditional mentality of going to a poorer location to help and is now outdated. And unfortunately, many faculty and administrators may not be aware of more contemporary approaches. And so there are some publications here. I'm going to give you a link where all these can be found, emphasizing that this transition has happened, and international educators and leadership is often positioned in a way to be vetting programs that students and or faculty want to create or go on. There's kind of a perfect storm for why poorly designed practices happen, including power imbalances in healthcare, inherently in healthcare, but also power imbalances between locations that are richer or poor, the rise of illness treatments, both for chronic disease and infectious disease that really require longitudinal care. Duffel bag medicine is no longer adequate. A high-risk environment where students, patients, faculty are at increased risk for injury, either for themselves or injuring others. Easily ignored health systems that look very different than what students and faculty are used to seeing. And so we can come up with a false narrative around that. And then highly motivated students, often pre-health, pre-medical students who want to get experience pre-professionally. And unfortunately, organizations that enable or allow students to get this experience, even though it's out of line with contemporary laws, ethics, and understanding. There's a lot of work in the realm of partnerships because, again, this changing of the dynamics around what students and faculty are doing also is concurrent with changing partnership dynamics, really being aware that colonial partnerships, that unequal partnerships and inequitable partnerships are rampant, and schools and institutions are really being called out for that. The Brocher Declaration is a good place to go. It has partnership best practices from the field of development, academia, nonprofit sector, education, and other sectors coming together. University of Minnesota has created the Global Ambassadors for Patient Safety. This is open access online for both faculty and students to really make sure that students are aware that they need to be practicing aligned with patient safety. The Community-Based Global Learning Collaborative, which used to be Global SL, has fair trade learning, and they have a rubric that is extremely helpful for building and operationalizing partnerships. So really recommend going there and looking at how your programs hold up to the rubric. Foreign Education Abroad has standards for undergraduates in health-related settings that were recently updated. And then all these resources and more can be found on CFHI's page. In terms of what we're trying to do, you are trying to create programming that is aligned with ethical principles and practices. You can see all those on the red and purple outer ring. Unfortunately, often activities are antithetical to these principles, such as humility, sustainability, honesty, and openness, solidarity. When you're not trained in health professions, it's hard to detect poorly designed programs. So I would say the biggest red flag is if a program or a faculty or a program provider is making students feel like they're going to be a solution to a health challenge internationally, that program is probably not adhering to best practices. Also, anything that oversells the role of outsiders in the local health ecosystem. It's really challenging on campus because you need to get a lot of communities of practice together that often don't sit at the same table. I'm happy to talk more about how to do that. I think partnering with third-party providers who have some of this infrastructure already in place can often help. And unfortunately, there's limitations to faculty, both because faculty can have expertise. This poster was at a peer-reviewed conference, and it was a French language professor who had taken students to Haiti. And one of the quotes was, I will never forget the experience of helping to deliver a baby in Haiti and being able to say congratulations to the mother in a language she could understand. This was an undergraduate student, and helping to deliver babies is completely illegal and unsafe and unethical. And when I brought it up to the faculty, she glowed and said, yeah, she delivered the baby and she spoke French the whole time. And the faculty was really excited by that. So our faculty may have expertise in one realm, such as French language, but not in the content of the service area. You can also see that they were rotating at orphanages, which is also not currently held as a best practice. So I know that was a lot of different topics. Look forward to continuing the discussion. Email, come to the landing page, or engage in the Q&A. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. I mean, you've certainly achieved what we are looking for. Is, you know, these types of programs, I think, are commonplace or something that our faculty want to examine or experiment with. But some of the points you highlight really help make it, you know, what does that kind of experience look like, you know, post-COVID, 21st century. So thank you so much for that perspective. Oh, I see somebody saying that I am on 2 screens. Well, let me get off of the screens, because next we want to have our next presenter, who is Molly Dineen with Prodigy Finance. So I'll pass the baton to Molly.
Great, thanks, George. And it looks like I'll go ahead and share screen here. It's such a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you for sharing some of your day, whatever time zone you're joining us from. My name is Molly Dineen Pagello, and as George shared, I am with Prodigy Finance. A bit about me quickly. I have 15 years experience in the international enrollment field. I've spent some time working for the Australians, looking at education policy. I've also spent some time working for an Irish institution, crafting their North American kind of global strategy, really focused on full degree recruitment. And one thing I consistently ran into there is that even the best laid strategic plans all had something often in common, which is this challenge of global access. And it's a growing challenge for us as the global economy continues to change. Certainly the last few years have taught us to even be more agile. So taking over from Jessica, I'm going to shift the narrative entirely to a different aspect. And again, as George said, kind of stretch your minds to think about partnerships in a very large way. Before I dive into the content, if it's your first time hearing about Prodigy, we have been around since 2007. We were really founded based on a basic principle that education access should not be barred for those who just have traditional funding. So that means that we seek to serve students regardless of whether they have kind of traditional access to things like local credit, collateral, or a cosigner. In fact, our model looks at the future earnings potential of a student based on the fact that they get into some fantastic programs globally. So we actually vet the schools themselves and the programs and are able to make a loan, traditional loan that disperses through financial aid offices. So when you think about partnerships, you can think about it in a very large way. And often it can be, institution to institution, or it can be, okay, partnership, that means paid. Well, Prodigy is an example of a financial access partner, but actually one that costs the university no money. And so what you're going to hear me talk about today is how something like some organizations like Prodigy Finance can fit into your toolbox and ultimately at no cost to the institution might really help support making your quality education more accessible. So quickly on our track record, we have followed this model to serve 33,000 students. We're very proud that the vast majority of those, over 85%, come from emerging economies. And we know that the future is pushing us even further that way. We support those students across about 1,000 academic graduate schools that are really dotted across the globe. They are in 19 countries, although the vast majority of school count is currently in the US. We're very proud we just expanded this month to Australia as well. We have dispersed $1.5 billion in student loans, and we disperse those directly through financial aid offices in the US or their counterparts globally. We increase access and feel that measurable human impact across 150 nationalities that are eligible for our funding. The main thing that a student needs to get Prodigy funding is a letter of admission from your programs. We're very proud that we are increasing and challenging and partnering with institutions to think wider about access. We're also proud that our annualized default rates are less than 1%. And that's because fantastic universities that we work with and the programs that we see, if we look at our own data, 74% of our students say they double or more than double their salary upon exit. That is sustainable, scalable good through international education, and certainly something that I think we can all be proud of in the field. So zooming away from Prodigy, why does this matter? Well, I'd like you to think about big picture, that future. What we know is that the number of international students is growing today and will continue to grow. Why is that? Well, if you look at the World Bank, if you look at UNESCO, among a great number of other sources, it is very clear where this globe is heading. That is, emerging economies are going to continue to grow, and that very importantly, there is a budding and more diverse middle class. In the next 25 years, World Bank projects that there will be 750 million additional students enrolling and demanding high-quality tertiary education. This is for the first time in their families. So this is in addition to the existing and their generations of the future, 750 million additional seeking tertiary education, predominantly coming from very emerging markets today. So summarizing simply, is your institution, is your partnership, if you're coming from the partnership side, positioning itself with or against these simple trends? That rising class, that globalized workforce, so not just seeking cross-border experience, but also seeking job opportunities cross-border and beyond. And bottom line, the push for more accessible education. That word accessible absolutely means more flexible education and can mean digital education as well. But it can also mean access to education in whatever form, digitally or not, or on campus, in the financial access behind it. So guiding some implications of these big questions and maybe guiding you to think broader about that category of financial access partners. Is your international strategy as of today really capitalize on the seeding growth of the emerging economies out there? Or are you still mostly focused on engaging just your major markets today? Are you looking at the incredible growth numbers coming, and then we know will only continue to come from sub-Saharan Africa, from Latin America, from South Asia? Or are you continuing to double down on just where international students have historically come into your programs? Are you acknowledging and engaging your colleagues on campus as well as broader on the global cost of access to your credentials, and really considering both in the immediate, medium, and long ways to increase that access? Because if you're not, your competitor likely is. How are you conveying that return on education? So inclusive of supporting the incredible investment for emerging market candidates. And how are you seeking partners, be it on campus cross unit or beyond, to governmental, nonprofit, as well as entities like Prodigy Finance that offer financing options to position your reach, increased yield, and graduation of the globe's changing face of top talent? We know, or rather most of us know, if you're not familiar, IIE is a great source of a tremendous amount of data. So just using some of the data out there, over 80% of the students coming into the US studying full degree undergraduate, and about 60% of graduate international students claim that they are personally or family funded. Further, another 20% of international students, or 20% of their portion, would say that they are funded by their university, leaving a pretty big gap. How do students from emerging markets currently afford degrees abroad? And layering on some of what we know about those future trends, the emerging and growing demand from really truly emerging economies outside our major markets, what does personally and family funded look like today, and how is that going to change in the future? How are universities, how is the higher ed sector as a whole addressing this rising cost? And what we know does not look to be like an increased overall pool of scholarships. How are we talking to students about their ability to pay, their reasons for doing it, and supporting them in the fullest way so that they can plan and think about that future? Looking at Prodigy Finance's own data, we've seen that, of course, like everyone else, there's been a giant shakeup in things. So if we look at our application data from 2019 to today, what we can see is that there has been a dramatic change in a relatively short period of time of the size of a loan requested. Just to cite, those numbers on the left there are for two-year programs predominantly. So you'll see kind of those numbers across the board increasing for the loan requested. Well, why is that? Because you see the personal savings gap is shrinking, and the scholarships that they're receiving, be it from institutions or other places, are also shrinking. That means that international students are needing to get more and more scrappy, let alone if they're coming from, again, that emerging middle class that we know is coming in the next 25 years, even more so. Looking at 2022, what we've seen is naturally that there is a giant growth, no surprise to probably a lot of you on this call, coming from the STEM fields, that our nationalities have really seen a shakeup in the last few years. In particular, Pakistan and Peru are climbing the ranks like we wouldn't have traditionally maybe expected in the top 5. A third of our students are women, and of course, we are excited to continue to see that trend growing and to encourage it globally. And our average loan size per year, so is 35K this year. So if you double that, that's about 70,000. And again, showing from a trajectory of growth, saying and showing the need for international students to finance and ultimately seek out more options than they are currently having from personal savings and scholarships. So all this to say is I invite you to think proactively on global access. Your possible partners, which might be on your own campus, just starting there, thinking about the holistic picture of resources, not just scholarships or fellowships, but beyond that, TA-ships, employment on campus, government partnerships, fellowships, as well as full student funding options, such as providers like Prodigy Finance. There's other similar providers to us. We welcome their competition in, such as Lendwise, Leap, Empower, etc. And think about action steps that you can take that cost you nothing to start sharing information on the holistic picture. Speaking of, I won't spend time reading these, but if you're thinking about ways to make small actions, to take small actions that might have big impact, really it comes down to starting conversations. So think about, or even take a few minutes this afternoon to look at how you talk about your funding options for international students. On the places where students tend to find you, is it really clear the cost, the total cost of their program? Is it clear their options for funding in the holistic way? We know that other country markets, such as the Australians, do a great job of highlighting, for example, campus job opportunities. That's not something we tend to see quite as much across North America. Are we talking and embracing the fact that there are loan options, not just for domestic students, but also for international candidates? Or are we shying away from that? Are we making sure that our teams across campus, be it recruiters, be it international student services, be it program directors, financial aid, are on the same page and sharing information? Or is that something that tends to get a little turf war-like? Are we providing clear return on investment outcomes for international students and proudly owning those? I can tell you that we know, and in fact have built our entire company model on the great outcomes and terrific repayment that data that we see consistently coming out of your stellar programs. How are you talking about that? And again, how can you get that information out there so that it's helping students and getting and leaning into what we know is that continuing trend of shaking up access and meeting students from the most emerging economies where they are as they're considering what's possible. Just to say, you also should maybe get ready for some possible roadblocks, and maybe you already have a few popping to mind. There tends to be an innate hesitancy to acknowledge the reality of student financing, and it's not actually limited to international students. So, acknowledge that. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about what's driving that, and rather what the impact of not talking about it is. Which means that we're not going to be increasing that access further. We're not inviting more diversity. We're only expecting the students that have historically been able to fund their own degrees to continue to come. Well, that doesn't sound like it's on point with the trends of the global economy. Talk cross-unit. Think about ways to build bridges, be it between enrollment in financial aid or the international office, or the strategy, central admissions, whatever it is, and start talking about possible roadblocks to international student access. Share information about about funding for international students, just like we do for domestic students. Make sure that we're all informed across team. And also think about timing. What I've found working with many universities is that they do talk about access to funding, but only if a student asks. Well, how hopeful is that? Let's say you are a student who's really excited but nervously researching on the internet, as many students start off doing. If you're not seeing ways for you to seriously consider your degree, serious ways that could meet and make it a reality for you to consider applying, are you going to continue to engage? And how many students are we missing that we're not proactively inviting to consider our stellar programs? So in short, we strongly believe at Prodigy, and I've seen it time and time again, as well as at my work prior to Prodigy, that funding transparency really helps in broad ways. And so if you're thinking about international partnerships, I would put this put this out there as one that you should certainly consider. It allows students to find their best fit programs, and for those institutions and academic programs to yield their best fit students. It increases education access across markets, including those coming from the most emerging markets. It, of course, increases the diversity of the applicant pool and the competition. It leads to more diverse cohorts, richer classroom experience, enhanced learning outcomes. And of course, all of that raises reputation, brand, and interest growth. In short, I hope I've made a pitch to get you thinking about starting or continuing this conversation, be it on your campuses or wherever you might be tuning in from. This is a conversation that we have in many places, but certainly one that NAFSA, the Organization for International Education, is centered on. If anyone's attending that, I'm looking forward to being at that conference too. Maybe we can meet up for a coffee. But the bottom line is, let's continue to push the boundaries about who can access our stellar international education. That is a great and clear pathway to sustainable, measurable human impact. So let's look at that access question. Let's talk about it. So thank you with that. Looking forward to continuing the conversation here or elsewhere. And with that, I will pause my share and turn it back to you, George.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to the questions that are going to stem from the content, because so many of our universities invest in the international partnerships and the big internationalization strategies. But if our students can't afford to participate, it's a real barrier to access and all the goals. So thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to the Q&A with you. But last but not least, let's have our third panelist today, Ben Webb with QS, speak before we jump into the group Q&A. Please continue to use the Q&A feature of Zoom so we can gather our questions there. And so, Ben, may I pass the baton to you?
Sure. Thanks, George. Hopefully you guys all see my slides here.
There they are.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the time today and great insights, Molly. I think you did a great lineup for us over here at QS. So I want to jump in. Again, my name is Ben Webb. I'm the head of client partnerships here for North America at QS. I come from your side of the table. I recently joined QS in this role about 2 years ago. Prior to that, I was all in recruiting. My latest stop is Carnegie Mellon. I was there in the Tepper School for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was at Penn State main campus for 4.5, working in their business school and starting master programs, and then at a small school called Wilkes University up in Northeast Pennsylvania. So kind of worked my way across all different sizes and levels of university, all on the recruiting side. And what I want to do is take a little bit of a different approach here. We're more of a tactical side of things, of how do you look at your partnerships? How do we grow our partnerships? And how do we make them sustainable and figure out where we want to go? So for all of you that may not be familiar with QS, we've been around for about 30 years, starting out in MBA access for students to be able to find different programs, running events globally, and have morphed really into a globally known resource, from whether it's the QS World University rankings, to our conferences, enrollment solutions to help increase and diversify your classrooms, to really analytics on what is my reputation of my university around the world? Where do we start looking at partnerships? What type of university should I be going up to pair with? And those that may be looking to pair with us. So really, we're a full-scale provider from enrolling students into university, understanding who you are, what you are, where you should be, and then exposure at conference to be able to really kind of get your global brand out there and meet these partners like Molly and others at places to have those great conversations. And I think a good place to start is really, where do we go in this partnership world when there's so many opportunities? What type of students should I be going to? What country should I be looking at? And one of the things QS does as a partner to our universities is we run the International Student Survey. It's the largest international student survey in the world. In 2022, we received 110,000 responses from 194 different countries, with 94 different institutions participating in this. And during this survey, we're really looking to understand what students want, what are their concerns, what are their needs, where they want to go in the world. And we partner with universities to send this out to the students that they're looking at, so you can benchmark and understand yourself as a university versus the global atmosphere. So some of the examples that we have here, I'll give you an opportunity to participate in this as we're collecting this data right now, but it's what do students look at when choosing a country, right? Like, where do I want to go and start my partnerships? What are these students looking for? And does my university to relate to what they're looking for? So this kind of gives a little bit of an example of some of the data in which we collect, in which you could get a free benchmarking result of this, right? So what are they looking for in a country, but then also how do they want to be communicated to by country? And this is just two little quick snapshots of some examples that we get, but we also look at what is the geographic breakdown of the students your funnel is made up for. So we talked about emerging markets there. Molly talked about Peru, right? Well, maybe your funnel is only 3% of students from Peru, but the average global market is 25 or 30% of that market. So how do we really make sure, okay, we're not on the global scale, we need to be able to pair up with that and get these kind of great insights so you can understand how to communicate to those study abroad students that might be looking, but also your partners. And then we help you by quantifying this data into what we call our student insight tracker, for you to be able to make those decisions on where do I most likely fit with my reputation to be able to go and create these partnerships. So from our survey in 2022, right, we surveyed by country, where they take a university ranking is the most important thing for the students that live in that country. So you know that if you're a 1 through 100, a top 50 university, these are the countries that are going to most likely want to engage with you as a partner. These are where they really care about the prestige marketing. They want to be related to prestige marketed schools. And they know, okay, this is where our students are looking for. So those are where our partnerships are wanting to be created. But then we also know on the flip side of this, how do we match our reputation for students that are looking at hard ROI, right? They're looking for what's the availability of the scholarships? What are we looking to do there? And we could say, okay, we know that the Pakistan universities, these students are looking for good available scholarships. Our university has amazing merit-based scholarships. We have an amazing discount rate or a partner with amazing companies that can help get them here. And then we can show the value of our university. But it's also about that narrative. As we saw in the last slide, we were looking at China, Japan, and Spain were some of the top countries looking for reputation-based growth. But they're also number 7, 8, and 9 for caring about return on investment. So it's also about how do we control our narrative when looking for partnerships to be able to speak to these universities and these opportunities to make sure that we're strategically aligned. So that's just a little bit of a snap of kind of some of the data that we provide. And I'll put a link here that if you would like to, as a university, participate in this and get these for reports, we would love to have you there. But this is kind of setting the zone of where do we start? There's lots of universities, lots of places. Where do we go with that? And what I want to talk about here is hopefully some of you in this room, and I think if Loyal Marymount's on here, I mean, there's some clients in this room too, that how do we best enact and use services to be able to really work on these emerging markets to get to these partnerships and really be mobile there. And what that breaks down to is a resource that we have here at QS called Move On. And it's really about an RRM, which is our institutional relationship management, and then mobility management. And what this goes to do is really empower you as international office to transform the student journey, create that environment to build and track where are we going, what is working, where do we want to be, but then really go in and actually digitize this process, streamline it, save human hours from running through millions of Google Docs, working through hard paper, and really make this a streamlined professional process. And some of the things that really focus on here is really meeting you as a university where you are and with what your struggles are happening. So centralize that partnership data. If you're sharing data from Salesforce or from Slate and then some homegrown system, how do we put that onto one place, be able to customize these tools? But really, I mean, we all know the hurt that's happened in higher education. Most of us don't have many very big teams. So how do we reduce that burden on our administration, make sure that we can, at a drop of a hat, if we're asked how many partnerships do we have in Panama, we can do that sort of stuff. So really what this tool is meant to do is help you be successful in your internationalization strategy and in your plan. So from some data that QS has, right, we know where we want to go, what that market looks like, but then we go, should we be investing in these developing international programs? Would these universities in these countries actually want to partner with us as a university? Should we be looking to make new partners here, or should we be able to grow others? And that's really what Move On does, is help you track and create those partnership strategies. And we do it on a global scale. So there's over 300 institutions in the world that come out here. We have 60 in North America. But it's really a large community that we look to go into, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into that here in a moment. But from a relationship management side of things, what Move On does is, again, kind of solve those problems. We know that 62% of institutions have over 100 partnerships from the 2022 survey, right? But 46% of them don't have systems to manage this. So that's exactly where the gap stop comes in. Maybe you're using Salesforce, you're using a Slate or a system, but this system is designed strictly for your partnerships, for your mobility, for your study abroad, for your grants and partnerships, and really centralizes that down in a common database, normal RFIs, normal CRM view, but really be able to put these all into certain areas and make this tool speak to the way that you want it to speak. But not only is it kind of centralizing that data and making it really manipulative for you to be able to use that data, but also to be able to market and work with the partners that you have. So setting up a communication plan of, okay, we know this relationship is going to expire in 4 months, and Rosa's in Spain, and maybe you have to do it in her dialect. So we can update all of those things that we say, hey, 6 months before that expires, boom, here's an automated message to yourself to go off on. And then boom, we send that automated service or process out to rebuild that communication, provide those documents to go through. But it's also for those relationships that maybe you don't have a partnership with, but they've been on your track for a while. How do we market about our amazing sustainability research that we've been working on and doing, and why we would be a good fit for a school out in New Zealand to be able to do it? So we build that communication plan through here and we automate that messaging, or we can put it through on one-offs and be able to record this, but it houses, again, what we're looking to build and what we're striving to design from a specific partnership side of things. And then again, of course, all of our leadership out there, they'll call you on a Monday morning and say, we'd love to have a report on by noon about our partnerships in Peru or for Latin America. So it allows you to really report and analyze this data in a format of many different ways, from Excel to Tableau, so on and so forth. It allows you to visualize that in different variations for you depending on who you need to present this to. But what you're looking at here on this screen with this little map is probably one of the most important parts of the Move On system is the community. So of those 300 universities that are out there, you can go on to this and say, okay, in Latin America, I can click on Brazil and see that there's 5 universities using the system, and they're looking for these type of partners. And you can automatically integrate, fill out their publisher form, and now you can say, I'm interested in working with you as a partner to be able to go on this sustainability research for the rainforest, for trees, or for water cleansing, things like that. So it really brings it back in. And then as you grow those relationships, it can kind of build out and kind of transform what your data looks like, how many partnerships that we have, where we're going, so on and so forth. And one of the great examples we have here is, if you guys can see this website, is for Loyola Marymount, right? Highlights all of their partnerships that they have, where they're going from, what universities are there, and really kind of consolidates it down so we can understand where are those partners, where can we look to increase them with, and are they a good fit for us? So cliff noting a very long usual deck here from a resource model. We also go into the mobility management. So those of you that are on the study abroad and the student exchange side of things, that publishers on the same thing, but for student facing. So students get to come to your website, they get to come in and say, oh, this is where you're having partnerships out there. We would like to be a part of that from our host university to yours. And what this product lets us do is really work on and streamline all of this for applications. So whether you're using maybe a central grad school application, you're using something within Slate, this formulates it directly to you all. So you can come in and say, okay, great. We have 35 applications coming out from Germany, right? What do our research and our partnerships look like from there? How do these applications come in? And make it work for the best thought for you and what the most easiest clarification would be for your office to understand, where are we getting all these students from? Where are we getting these applications? And how can we quantify them, report on them, and then actually get these kind of submitted, accepted, or rejected to be able to grow those study abroad and those relationships. And it's not only about really the application portion of it, but it's also about the customization of what you need in the data you're wanting to collect. So in addition to really being able to go through this, obviously additional resources for that process and application, internal reporting, and again, it's about access. So getting an overview of all incoming and outgoing apps. So this also isn't just for the people that wanted to come to you, but you can manage this internally. So if you're a large university with maybe 4 different branch campuses, or your state school system, you can go through and have this set up for each area to know, okay, Penn State, right? Penn State, Maine sending 50 people out from here. Penn State, Berks County sending from here. Maybe the Erie campus has people going to different areas. So we can see all across the board, where are our students globally, and where are people coming in across this world. And it tracks them across multiple things, but also allows you to digitize the workflow. So maybe 1 week into their trip in Italy, you want to send a reminder of, hey, make sure we're staying safe, or maybe there's a reminder for a program that needs to be reported back on, or maybe there's an emergency that we need to talk about. This system will allow you to do all of that with a push of a button, to be able to go through and instead of having to do one-offs or kind of find different groups from different buckets that were there, you can easily report it out and be able to digitize and automate that workflow at a mass area, to be able to make sure that we're getting things out in the quarterly time that they need to be out there and providing that information to those students. And that's from the student side. There's also grants and funding. Where are we getting the funding for our study abroad? Where are we going with our partnerships? When are these going to expire? What does this communication flow need to look like? Can we have these documented for long term to be able to make sure we're having our updates that come through, we're hitting things before they expire? Maybe we're finding new opportunities that are coming into us through our publisher on the global partnership scale. So a lot of different ways that you can really leverage and use this tool. But I think one of the best things that it allows from a study abroad standpoint, and just partnerships, is really consolidating that data, right? Having everybody in one place, one house, and be able to report on that multiple ways to different stakeholders. So if you're finding yourself in a situation where you're using various areas, multiple different tools, and have a difficulty when your university or your leadership is saying, hey, we want to know, what do our partnerships look like for a specific region? What is the funding that we're putting in versus externally? This is what's going to be able to put all of that data management into one area, so we can be informed, report clear data, and be able to really understand, where are our partnerships and what do they look like? Where are they scalable? And where can we look to increase and create new ones? As I said, one of the best parts about this with QS is the community itself, those 300 universities that are out there. So we run a Move On conference. This is an amazing opportunity to be able to network and meet with them. Even if you are not in the Move On community, we definitely recommend being able to come to it. It's tied to our QS Europe conference this year. It's in Dublin. But last year, it was in Spain. We had 18 participating countries, almost 250 delegates, 124 participating institutions. Really good way as you start to look for your partnerships. As we talked about that data beforehand, what makes sense? Where does our university pair up and match up? This is another great way to meet universities like yourself that may be on the same path, that you can really then start to have those open discussions of, okay, I see where you are and this is where I would like to be. What was your pathway to get there, right? And that's just being part of doing what we do and doing webinars like this and getting into those conversations. So that's the very fast cliff notes. I know I'm the end of this conversation for everybody, so I probably sped through that faster than some of you may have wanted. I really highly encourage you to please feel free to ask any questions. I just put a link in here to the International Student Survey, or you can scan this. I'll leave it here, George, sorry for a minute, if anybody like to scan it with their phone. But we always encourage you. QS, it comes in various ways, right? We're a data insight provider, we're a recruiter, we're a partnership maintainer and grower. Whichever way that you look, that you may need some things from a partnership tactical level. It's really hard to say that there isn't a place that QS could be able to help you. But I really look forward to hopefully helping some of you grow some strategic partnerships, enable you to do that a little bit better, and always make things a little bit easier on ourselves. So thank you again for taking the time. We appreciate you being with us. I'll hand things over back to George.
Great. Thank you so much. A lot of great content. And again, different angles, different ways to be thinking about the international strategic partnerships that are different perspectives than what we see in many of the other content that's out there. But now I want to invite my colleague Rosa to help facilitate a Q&A in our remaining, nearly 10 minutes before we wrap up with some details about what's coming next with the Gateway Leadership Institute.
Thank you, George. And we have a couple of questions for our participants, but please feel free to write any other questions that you have for our presenters, for Ben Webb from QS, or for Molly Dineen. And for Molly, I'm going to begin with some questions for you, Molly. We have a participant that asked, I know you have answered maybe, but I think it would be interesting for everyone to find out more about whether Prodigy also loans to graduate students.
Yeah, thanks, Rosa. So our financial product is really based and best fit for a graduate style taught degree. So 2 years or length, 2 years of length or under. So not Ph.D., not medical degrees. But across graduate fields. In particular, STEM and business are hands down our largest. We would love to continue to, as we grow the model and build it, and certainly continue to see the great repayments, to build that as a solution for other things such as, boot camps or undergraduate, you name it. But right now at present, we're exclusively a graduate lender.
Thank you so much, Molly. And I know, Ben, that you've discussed an instrument that QS has, and I would like to ask you whether you've seen an increase in partnerships in QS after the pandemic, and if that's the case, how would you describe this increase, if it has any trends or anything that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it can kind of be piggyback off a little bit of the data that Molly shared. I think the pandemic has shaken everything up, right? So partnerships have been growing. For those of you that were just at AIEA, I think I saw a couple of people in here that I saw while we were there. I mean, the marketplace has very much shifted, and the old pipelines really aren't there, right? When you look at the IAE data, right? China and Saudi Arabia combined sent 32,000 less students to the United States than they did last year, right? We see the Malaysian and the Iraqi pipeline shrinking year over year as well. So partnerships that are there, right, are the opportunity through COVID has opened up to new markets that maybe people haven't gone to, maybe have had some less barriers. So they're definitely starting to look at from US institutions where these pipelines have had to close off and kind of move to other opportunities. Where are they going? And some of the things that we're seeing, right? I mean, the Indian market grew 19% year over year, sending almost 200,000 students last year to the States. but we're seeing places that maybe we haven't traditionally recruited as US institutions. The UK, for example, increased 28% last year in sending students to the United States due to Brexit, fees, those other things. We're seeing Nigeria and Mexico grow by 12% each area. So we're seeing a lot of people coming and trying to find and explore new opportunities within those areas and trying to figure out like what's the right place to start with this, right? Is it nonprofit organizations, groups within universities and cohorts, straight to global offices? So there definitely have been some different trends. COVID really shook everything up from a timeline standpoint. Needs and desires of students, right? I mean, we're a ranking company, but that kind of has gone down in the area where students are looking for what's my experience going to be, what's this university offer. So the qualifications of where we're partnering, who we're partnering, how we're partnering have definitely changed based off of student demand and what they're looking at for the experience they want. So yeah, it's definitely been a really interesting start here to 2023 with a lot of different trends and different opportunities arising. And I think it's gonna, as we get into this cycle a little bit deeper, I think we're really going to see that competition increase amongst universities and partnerships become even more important for universities' long-term sustainability.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that information, Ben. And going back to the future and future trends, Molly, what do you think in terms of loans and student mobility? Do you think are trends that are going to be here and are here to stay?
Yeah, I think there is an increasing desire to talk upfront about the total cost of education. And I think that is something that historically we don't do well in international higher education, in particular for full degree students. There is a desire to know upfront what the cost is so that students and their families, and sometimes their entire communities supporting them, can think and know holistically what that looks like. And so that I think is something that's absolutely here to stay. And the other thing is just that incredible, true mosaic of diversity that we're going to see continue to explode. It starts with one student, as many of you guys might know from your own campus, but we're going to continue to see small countries emerging and growing in their desire for quality education, both within their own countries, as well as internationally. And so how can we meet those folks who will be approaching tertiary education for the first time in their families with information in a holistic way so that they can explore their best fit and hopefully, fit within a great institution that can support them, be it accessing it digitally, be it within their own home countries, or of course, crossing borders.
Thank you, Molly, for that. And in the same line, Ben, I would like to also ask you, what do you think are practices that are here to stay? And thinking more in the future, what do you think is going to increase or grow in terms of partnerships in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. What I think is going to happen. I mean, I think that looking forward, right? I mean, partnerships have been a part of international education and being able to create these opportunities for exchange and things like that. But I think that from our lens right here at QS, I mean, our entire goal and our mission here is to be able to enable students to cross boundaries, cross countries, cross areas, to be able to diversify their education. And I think that is where the increase is going to come. There's universities that have been very open to these opportunities, and they've sought this out and they've created these pipelines. And there's universities who, I mean, it's unbelievable what we see with the type of universities and the size that are just starting this adventure, right, of doing these exchange programs and going into these markets to create international partnerships in a way that they never have. So I think that we're going to see a large increase in these universities seeking out very strategic partnerships. And I think that we're going to see a large kind of competition almost emerge of universities looking to be in those slots of primary partners that they're working with, because the demand that's going to be coming in, the level of universities that are now seeking these things. So I would say, I mean, the future of this is where we were, and it's scaling. It's going to be a larger opportunity, larger range of universities looking to get these students across and see what they can offer, versus where maybe it was a little bit of a smaller group, which is kind of crazy to think of all the universities that do it. But I think that's really going to scale. I think that we're seeing the demand for this, and the universities are seeing, right? I mean, there's the data was there that Molly put forward of the contribution. I mean, $33.8 billion to the U.S. economy for international students last year. I mean, there's an importance to be able to put this out into the world. So I think it's definitely going to be on the uprise and the growth, and think that the people that are not going to be able to buy in, or their universities may not buy into these international partnerships, are going to be at risk for some darker days ahead. So that would be my personal opinion on what we see from the data that we have here with international recruiting. But yeah, I mean, it's the message is to start.
And mindful of time, we've hit that hour. We always want to honor everybody's time. Rosa, may I jump in? Great. So we want to alert you that we do have our next webinar that will be coming up in about 2 weeks on March 27th. It's about maximizing impact through international partnerships. So we're excited for that. You can visit the website at Gateway now and still and register already. But for today, we want to thank all of our participating organizations and our sponsors, and of course, our 3 fantastic panelists. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to them. And of course, this webinar will find its way to the Gateway Leadership website and YouTube page. So you'll still have access to all of the content and all of the contact information. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Rosa, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.